that away from me. I tend to run the majority of my concerts now that I'm older, and I can. I don't have anybody telling me necessarily what to do. I kind of like to do them like keyboard conversations. So Ezra, if you could move forward one more thing for me. One of the things that I think is interesting about this truly most popular piece of all ragtime, it may be the most popular one of all time. And I think for those of us who are normal people, we can take heart in the fact that it was first turned down for publication. Like the rest of it, it met with some problems. One of the problems they said is it was too hard to play. That average people just wouldn't buy it because it's just all over the place and you can't tell what you're doing. And they're right about that. It's all over the place and you can't really tell what you're doing and you just kind of hang on. It's like a ride that you take with this. The Maple Leaf Club was actually in Sedalia, Missouri, which is about 100 miles maybe from St. Louis. And it was one of the hearts. This is one of the interesting things that you find that the majority of the upspring of ragtime started in the heartland, which I just think is fascinating. We always associate it with Harlem. That really came later. It started predominantly in Texas and St. Louis is where it started with. So Joplin spent several years in Sedalia, Missouri, and one of his good friends ran a club called the Maple Leaf Club. It turned into, it only lasted maybe 3 years because the local preachers didn't like it, and they said it was a bad influence on the young people of their society. The reason wasn't just the alcohol and the card playing, but they said one of the problems that you have with it is that where it was kind of set up to be a gentleman's, kind of a club where you really were supposed to be uplifting yourself there. They often would invite people in to see them perform at the Maple Leaf Club. One of them was to raise money for a cornet band that went around. But then oftentimes the Caucasian people came and donated money, and the pastors did not feel like that was appropriate for to be that kind of mixing that was going on. This most popular piece, he earned 1 cent per copy. It was so difficult that in the first year it only sold 400 copies. So think about that. That's how much he earned from this piece, 400 cents for this most popular piece. It was not a first published rag. What I want to do next is take you to the next person in line, who is the first published rag by an African-American composer. There were a few others prior to this, but his takes note because of this. Joplin visited his father's club. His father had a club in the St. Louis area. Thomas Turpin himself started out not necessarily in music, actually went to Nevada, bought a share in a gold mine with his brother. They did not become rich. He came back and started a club called the Rosebud Club. I'll let you move forward to that. Not sure that you can see, but this is an actual advertisement of the Rosebud Club, and you can see where it talks about good service and gentlemanly comportment at this particular club. He was a good friend to Joplin, and so they did know each other, and he printed before Joplin did. His music was accepted first. One of the sad things about Thomas Turpin is he did massive productions for the Booker T. Washington Theater, and every week after they got done, to keep people from stealing their ideas, they destroyed all the music. So 2 or 3 years worth of wonderful stuff is just gone. And I think that's a fascinating thing. The rag that he first published, even though he never visited there, is called Harlem Rag. It's going to follow that repetitive pattern where you're going to see like an 8-measure idea, and then they're going to expand a little on that 8-measure idea, and then they're going to do another 8 measures, and they're going to make it, play with it just a little bit, and it's going to begin and end the same way. So it has a very long form. It's more important to see this stuff up here, is what I feel like. This is a piece written by Eubie Blake. You know Eubie? You may have seen him even on TV if you couldn't see him in person. He oftentimes is on the Merv Griffin show and the Johnny Carson show. I saw him do a wonderful, you can go on YouTube and find almost anything these days, saw him do a wonderful put down of Johnny Carson. He was asking him if he knew about something, and Johnny said he didn't understand that concept. And Eubie said, well, how did you get to be on the show anyway? And of course, you know, that was just like great, and that was like 1977. Eubie, have you gone to Eubie?
Yes.
Oh, excellent. We don't really know when he was born. There are so many different dates. He liked to think, though, that he was 100 years old when he died. That was important to him, to have been 100 years old. One of the interesting things from him is that he really did span the beginning of ragtime revival of the 1970s. And most of them were on the front end or on the back end, but not all the way through. Eubie had a hand that was that much bigger than mine. And most of the rag pianists had very large hands, which I do not have. He could span a 14th. Some of them could go as far as 2 octaves. That is not my particular gift. And so after a while, my hands will know the difference about that particular thing. He ended up with a degree that he got after a successful career as a jazz pianist. He goes back and gets a degree at 65. Again, another one of these where you just kind of think, this is awesome. This is called Chevy Chase. A Chevy Chase is a French word for fox hunt. More than likely, it was because of Chevy Chase, Maryland, because he lived in the Baltimore area. But if you look at the piece of music, I gave you an old one and a young one. I don't know how much you can see. Can you see the little foxes on it? Yeah, the original music was printed with foxes on it because it was to illustrate a fox hunt. I understand on the foxtrot that you do. Now, anybody have a foxtrot? My understanding is it's like 4 slow, 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 quick, 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 turn, 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 slow, slow, like that. And so again, in the ragtime era, you've got all these animal dances, the foxtrot, one was the bear that you were supposed to do. There was a squirrel that was supposed to kind of go like this, and that's why they kind of thought they were losing it. That, and of course, the fact that most of it was done at houses of ill repute. But the animal dances people thought were just flat inappropriate. Eubie had a great character though, and I think you'll enjoy his Chevy Chase. You actually can hear some pieces of what we call a stop rag, because you'll be playing along and then it just kind of stops, and then it starts back up again. He also did some recordings for some of the early silent movies. Not the silent ones, but when they started putting in just music, but you didn't really have like words to go with it, but you got background music. So you can kind of see some of the Charlie Joplin, I think, in this one. Eubie Louis Bowman, born in the Fort Worth, Texas area. Tarrant County, for those of you who might know, it encompasses quite a wide range. He got his start, like a lot of them, playing in what you would call honky-tonks and other fine places, establishments, all the way from Texas up to Kansas City and back down again. I worry a little bit about his personality. When you read his history, he married, and he and that wife were apart within 2 months. And then some years later, he married again. They made it 4 weeks. They divorced on grounds of cruelty. Hers, he said. So I think he was kind of a picky man. Lived with his sister most of his life. His sister was his main piano teacher, that and the other traveling musicians that were kind of around him. The 12th Street Rag, which is very, very popular, is innovative in that the way that it's constructed puts 3 sitting against 2. You're going to have that this, that, but the melody is just 3. And because of that, it gets apart from itself kind of nicely. Again, this was refused publication because it said it's extremely difficult. There is a piece of it that I found particularly difficult. If you have that hand, then probably not so much so. But he has this section. Okay. My hand just didn't reach that far. And so they had real difficulty. They came back, asked him to continue to tweak it because he couldn't sell enough copies because nobody could reach it and play it. I actually have to do this little funky little, I have to play part of it kind of upside down and then the rest of it right side up again because of how short my particular hand is. It'll be very, very familiar to you. Also, they said the arpeggiated beginning. People didn't like that either. I don't know. It's the third part that you hear it in. He'll do it with a straight rhythm and then kind of a jagged rhythm and then this funky little thing that has the turn at the end. The 12th Street, are you on the picture? Okay, so he worked at an establishment on 12th Street in Fort Worth. But there's also one in Kansas City where he visited, and the people who designed the cover, that is Kansas City. That is the view that you would get from the road in Kansas City. I don't know. I'm not sure I really care a lot, but I thought I would share that with you. I thought you could. Oh, he only got like $400 for this piece. And he got mad about it, so he went to New York to fight with him about it later in his life. Not super later, because he wasn't that old. And when he got to New York, he caught pneumonia and died, like 3 days later. So $400 for this piece. want to get up, doesn't it? Didn't it just make a... Your next song is more bluesy than ragtime. Though Joplin is known for his ragtime, I thought it'd be interesting to throw in what they consider to be one of his true gems. It was repopularized by the movie The Sting in the 70s, which is what kind of caused everybody to go, this is great music, why aren't we listening to this music? It was because when I was first practicing, say in the 60s-ish, no, you can't perform this at a contest, no. This is just that ragtime music. By the time my children came along, it's actually on contest lists now because we recognize the form is great and stuff like this. This is called a Mexican serenade. There's no real reason for it to have been called a Mexican serenade. It sounds a little bit like a habanero that you might have from Cuba. You'll hear some aspects of the tango in it, and where this all came from with Joplin, it is not like any of his other music. It's slow, it's got a beautiful, soulful melody in it, and I just thought, let's just take a moment. The next gentleman, Lucky Roberts, he's known as Lucky. His name is spelled like Lucky F, but he's known as Lucky. And he is very lucky in many ways. He's 4'10", and you'll see he's the short guy in the photo. And yet, even his hands span to 14th. And I'm like, how did that happen? That a 4'10" guy has that ability. Matter of fact, there were even rumors, totally unfounded, that he must have gone in and cut the webbing between his fingers to be such a short person with such a huge reach. They were just like, oh, surely this must be what happened with him. It's not what happened at all. He was, his mother died like within 3 weeks of when he was born. And his dad decided he couldn't keep him. And I've never heard of this before in my life, but his father handed him over to a Quaker family because he was born in Pennsylvania, and yet they were a vaudevillian Quaker family. I never heard of such a thing. He started his first stage appearance, he was like 2, and he was performing in an Uncle Tom's Cabin show, and he was just to pretend that he was asleep on stage. And then he got into acrobatics and tumbling and all that kind of stuff, and that was kind of his first introduction into the musical world. He still stayed in touch with his father. His father understood his love of music and eventually helped him get some lessons so that he could actually do some of this publishing. He is the first then Harlem composer that we know of who is published, because he then goes into that Harlem area, published around 1912. He's known particularly for this, what we call the stride bass, where you're just doing the jump all the time with this. One of the people that he took under his wings and mentored was George Gershwin. Now, if you read very many biographies of him, George doesn't oftentimes it's not included in there, but we know they met. We know they spent quite a bit of time together. George would come out and hang out at the places where Lucky played. He was a friend of Eubie Blake's. They were all kind of in that same circle. And it seems the Duke and Duchess of Windsor asked him to play for something when they came across to America. And he also played the DuPont Roosevelt. Franklin D. Roosevelt's son married one of the DuPont girls. He played for some of their parties that they had as well. So, he was in the upper crust of those who slummed in the bordellos and the honky-tonks. So I think it's just, to me, the fact that his hands were large, he was short, and he was in a Quaker vaudevillian family. And this is just one of these typical ones. They're named after places frequently, or just food. You're going to see some food ones coming up. This one's pork and beans, and I love the pork illustrated on here. And these are original music, copies of the original covers that we were able to find. Oh, I don't know, maybe Mr. Lemon should illustrate. This is also a turkey trot. And you're going to hear some turkey in this. And my understanding of the turkey trot is that you tilt and hop, and you're supposed to kind of have like the elbows going with it as well to do the turkey. And then you tilt 2, 3, 4, tilt 2, 3, 4, tilt, hop, tilt, hop, tilt, hop, hop. Totally irreverent. speaking of the heartland, I don't really need these, I just, like your whoopee. Adeline Shepard may be the most famous female composer in terms of productivity. She sold over 2 million copies, which is very unusual. And she was born in Iowa, and you're just like, Iowa? I don't know about you, but when I think of ragtime, New York, and the underground and prohibition and all that kind of fun stuff, in Iowa? My son lives there. They're still not there, I don't think. When I've been there, they're kind of like, in a box, But her family moved to Wisconsin, and she walked into a publisher's at one point and played this piece, and he said, well, do you, he was kind of unimpressed for a few measures, and then he kind of got, well, this is really pretty good. Well, can I get a copy of the music? And she said, well, I don't really write music down. It's like in my head. So, because she didn't really write music. She'd had a few lessons, but nothing in composition or anything like that. So she came back the next day, and they had a band leader in the town that showed up and notated it for her, sold all these copies. She went back later with 2 more pieces that he didn't buy them. And as was pretty typical for that time frame, she married a guy who was like an actuary. And the family didn't really support her other habit of writing ragtime music. She tried writing another one in World War I called the Victory March that we do have copies of, but again, it was not published either. And because people kept turning her down, even though the first one was immensely popular, she decided she didn't have talent. You'll see the one in World War I is written under her married name of Mrs. Olson. She decided she wasn't good and quit writing and raised 3 children, but gives you some information about pickles and peppers, which is another one of our foodies, is what I would call them. Can I go back there? I don't stop. This also has some of that, oops, my bad, that you heard in Joplin, where you have that top note that doesn't change forever and all the melody is hidden. You heard that in some Joplin, so I don't know if she heard Joplin or if it was just a part of that style at that point in time. So her melodies are inside. why she was very popular, because it's just kind of fun. Matter of fact, she was so popular that William Jennings Bryan, on his bid for the presidency, I think in 1912, this would be your field, Mr. Lemons, used this third part as part of his theme for his campaign, which I thought was fascinating. One of the things I haven't talked about is the fact that this is obviously focusing on the piano rags. There were also many vocal rags. Irving Berlin, known for many of them on his own. Lucky Roberts, the pork and beans guy, also did I'm Just Wild About Harry, and Harry Truman used that one during his bid for presidency. And of course, Irving Berlin's Alexander's Ragtime Band, which I'm not going to play here. There was a complaint lodged by Mr. Joplin against Mr. Berlin. He took him an opera that he wanted to produce, and Berlin just sat on it, didn't do anything with it. And then later, he published a song that sounded vaguely familiar to one of the songs in the opera. So they kind of had this falling out between the two of them at that point. Joplin died. We're an adult, predominantly community here now. So he died of what they call dementia paralytic, which was syphilis back then. And they said he never really played very well. If you listen to his piano rolls ever, they sound very what I would call pedantic, kind of just punchy, is what I would say. There's no nuance in them whatsoever. When Eubie Blake heard him in like around the early 20s, Eubie said it was almost sad. They were at a party together, and all the different rag pianists were taking turns. And he said, Mr. Joplin said no, and finally somebody talked him into it. And he said it was very sad to watch a man who had done so much, who really could just barely play, because it had eaten away at his brain so much. It had eaten away at his brain so much he became paranoid. And his wife, Lottie, tells of him going in and just destroying copies of music, anything that he had written. He became so paranoid that Berlin and others were just going to steal all of his music. And he never really got wealthy from his music. Didn't die a pauper, but he really didn't have a lot of money. Died in a mental institute because it just so destroyed his brain. And so one of his more popular ones, The Entertainer, which again was designed for a larger hand. France for a while. Well, you probably don't think a whole lot about ragtime music in France, but one of the things that was unique in Europe was, most of our ragtime pianists came from first-generation free men. Most of their parents, when you go back in your research, they were emancipated. And so what began happening in Europe, because there weren't slaves there were minstrel shows there that influenced a lot of what was going on in Europe at the time. Erik Satie, you would have heard one of his pieces in an Alka-Seltzer commercial years ago, one of his gymnopedies, which is one of the most famous pieces. He entered the Paris Conservatory at a very young age, like 11, but he didn't like the fact that they had rules for how you were supposed to write your compositions. There are structures that you're supposed to follow, and he tended to love strange sounds. He wasn't even in terms of an impressionist like we know of Debussy. He really kind of liked different sounds. But this particular piece, and you can see, he was also noted for walking across Paris every day, which is about a 5-mile trip across and about a 5-mile trip back. He also, I've got to make sure I say this right because I don't want to later then, wrote, he kind of poked fun at serious composers. He wrote one set of pieces called Genuinely Flabby Preludes for Dogs. He had a different sense of reality than a lot of people. He also wrote one called Vexations. It was 8 bars long, and it had slight variations for about 40 measures, and it came with instructions that you were to play it for 18 straight hours, at which point you would be truly vexed. He was a good friend of Debussy. He just thought Impressionism was too simplistic for him. He wanted things to be very different. So if you ever listen to his music, it'll bend you. That's what I would say. It bends me harmonically just a little bit. This one, on the other hand, not at all. This is a march. He probably got the idea from seeing one of the traveling minstrel shows. Well, now the next one has a history so incredibly rich. I'm going to put on my other glasses because I've got a multiplicity of pictures that go with this one. I did it right. Claude Debussy born into a poor family that worked hard to get him into the Paris Conservatory. That was where everybody wanted to be. You just want to be in the Paris Conservatory. I don't know what I can say. He had strange sounds. Everybody at the Paris Conservatory was always like, oh, there's Claude again doing these strange things in his music. His music sounds like a Renoir or a Monet painting looks. It's impressionism, where you're simply to kind of get this wonderful feeling that surrounds you. It's extremely difficult to play. It doesn't sound extremely difficult, but it is always extremely difficult to play. In 1880, he got to travel with a lady who took him to Russia and all around Europe. And so he began incorporating different sounds because of that. And while he was he won a prize called the Prix de Rome at one point. He got to study in Rome. And while he was there, he was exposed to Richard Wagner, who wrote the opera Tristan and Isolde. Okay, and Debussy decided, you're going to hear in this middle of this piece, he had this whole little... That is the Tristan and Isolde love theme. Okay, so if you know anything about opera, then... So Debussy stole that from him, incorporated it into his minstrel show, which would not have been unheard of, to take an idea and play with it in a minstrel show. Became, in 1905, it's when he published Clair de Lune, that all of you would know, which is part of a suite called the Suite Bergamasque. And then a little after that, he published his Children's Corner Suite, which is a misnomer at best if you're a pianist, because it's supposedly about things in the nursery for the children. It is not a for children to be played kind of a piece. They're quite challenging. He's got one that sounds like piano exercises, and one about dolls, and one about snow falling, and one about the big lumbering elephant in there. And one of the pieces in this suite is this Gollywog's Cakewalk. So for that, we're going to move forward, and let's see. Okay, so let's see if I can explain. The character in the middle is Gollywog. Now, I don't know if any of you have seen them in your lifetime in America. An American, her family was from England, but the lady's, Florence Kate Upton, moved back to England when her father died, when she was in her teenage years. And she wrote a series of books about the travels of these two Dutch dolls. They were wooden dolls. And they're actually called The Adventures of Two Dutch Dolls and a Gollywog. She designed this, black stuffed doll to be really the kind of the chivalrous caretaker for the other wooden dolls. When they would get themselves in bad places in the storyline, he would come to the rescue to rescue them. Now, originally people said, oh, how grotesque he is. Give me another one. There you can see they're about to be attacked and he's in the middle of it. How about one more? I gave you a bunch of these, and here they are. You see the two wooden Dutch dolls standing at the kitchen table there. What began to happen, though, another author named Enid Blyton wrote Naughty series, N-O-D-D-Y, not naughty, but Naughty series, The Adventures of Naughty. In that, she had what she called a golly. Now, Upton did not, have a copyright on Gollywog, on the name Gollywog or anything. So then Blythe comes by and takes it and makes it into an evil character, not a nice character anymore. And from the 1920s to 2008, you can kind of see the caricature that we had that was going in America of the blackface vaudeville that went on. What began happening, though, is some people then used the name pejoratively against others. A jam company called the Robertson Jam Company in England kind of did what was done in America with Aunt Jemima. You have the Aunt Jemima syrup, and Aunt Jemima used to be on the boxes, but then all of a sudden Aunt Jemima can't be on the boxes anymore. Well, there was a golly, or a gollywog, on the jam bottles forever, and they had buttons and pins, and you could get Golly perfume bottles. It was considered an appropriate toy, like a teddy bear, in Europe for years and years and years. Up till this last picture that I have over there, that's them for sale in 2008. Yeah, now our hackles are starting to move a little bit. Germany decided they wouldn't have them in the 30s. They said that is not appropriate for an Aryan. Aryans don't have toys like that. So Germany banned them, but we didn't, and England didn't. And it was there was actually even a Golly film in A Boy and His Gollywog in 2000 that was done in Australia. So now the Gollywog's cakewalk, the cakewalk was one of the more popular things that was going on in Sedalia, Missouri, back when Joplin was in there. And I will not attempt to illustrate very much of it, but the object was to kick extremely high with your body tilted backwards. And then you'll see some of the Charleston moves also. If you go online, I could not find a way to link you the film of the cakewalk, because I think you would just go, oh my goodness, could not. But there were cakewalk competitions. And so Debussy, during his time, there would have been no offense from the Gollywog in his mind at that point in time in history when this was published. It was actually, there was a ban on the jam, and they finally took the picture off the jam jars. But it was like in 2011 before they took it off of their jam jars. So interesting history about the Gollywog and the cakewalk. Now you can imagine the little doll and the child playing with the doll, and then the fake romance song in the middle. I'm concerned about time. So I may skip the Gottschalk and move on to the revival one. I think we'll do that, just because it's later than I thought. Someday we'll come back and do Gottschalk, but he's kind of like the beginning of it, so you can live without it, historically speaking. This one is a revivalist one. In the 70s, people uncovered his music. William Bolcom is considered one of the premier ones in terms of the revivalist ragtime music. And so this is a fun one. It's extremely what I would call programmatic. In other words, the music sounds like what it says it is, the tabby cat walk. He has extreme chromaticism. The meow, meow, meow. And at one point he has 3 meows kind of going all at one time. Over and over. And so you just have these like a whole cat chorus going toward the end of it. He uses strict ragtime rhythm, and then he does the swing ragtime rhythm, and so he kind of incorporates everything in it. And it's also a stop rag, so watch out. And I just want to thank my husband, who takes his life into his hands when somebody turns pages for me. I'm very rude. I want it now. Actually, a second ago, probably. And so my girls refused to fly back and do this for me. I don't know why. But he's going to turn pages because this one goes this way, and there was no way for me to spread it out. 5-minute intermission. Miss Irish is up.
Good afternoon. Last year, Linda was playing the piano at her husband Tom's installation as the executive minister of American Baptist Churches of Rhode Island. I heard her and I said, we have to have her for our 250th concert series. So I'm glad that you are here to enjoy that with us. We are doing our concert series as a free concert. We don't hear that during the morning because the heat is timed, so that doesn't happen. As a free concert series where we tell people that God has greatly blessed us, our everyday things we take care of with no problem. But he also greatly blessed us with a building that has a lot of needs. We found out since our last concert that these windows that go from the top through the basement story all the way down need a lot of work. $5,000 a window. And so at this time we will ask our ushers to come forward to receive an offering. Kevin will play on our organ because so many people come and ask us, does your organ work? Because a lot of places have stopped using the pipe organs. So he will play one hymn for us today, and then Linda will come back for our final song.
born Jacob Gershwin. He had the dream, only it was real. He one day read in the newspaper that he was giving a concert, and he'd forgotten about it. You know, that, oh my gosh, there's a test today, and I didn't study, and I didn't even know I was enrolled in that class. He had 3 weeks, and in that 3 weeks, he composed this for the Paul Whiteman. At that time, we would have called it more of a small ensemble. It has since been rewritten for full orchestration, arranged by Verdi Grofe, for solo piano, for 2 pianos. I don't know, when I do it with 2 pianos, I never feel like I have enough to do. After you've played the single piano version, you're like, I'm just sitting here now. And on this one, you're always extraordinarily busy. Lived only 39 years. Went to Hollywood. Shall We Dance? He had just finished Shall We Dance with Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, and was on a high and had been signed up to do a follow-up movie when he got ill. And they did surgery, and he had essentially an inoperable brain tumor and died just a few hours after the surgery ended at 39. He had been having bad headaches and funny smells, they said, for about a year. But we know in that early stage of our medical histories, that's probably would have happened anyway with him. Ira goes on to be a famous lyricist for how many musicals, I don't even know anymore. But anyway, in the Rhapsody in Blue, you're going to hear some places again where we kind of have the 3 against 2, or at one point there's like a 6 against a different strange number at the bottom, but they're offset by triplet patterns. He brought what was considered inappropriate music into revered concert halls and said, here it is, this is what it is, and look what it can come with a classical form, simple melody. And he writes this huge piece out of just this idea, which I think is absolutely fascinating when you start studying this. It has changed over my lifetime. How I play it has changed. You will hear some people play it just like lickety, I don't know, in Oklahoma we say lickety split, really fast. I mean, they just, we're gonna get through this thing. But the more I have studied where they spent their time, in their off hours, shall we say, I believe it involves a little more caressing, shall we say. One spot that I'll illustrate for you, I almost got in trouble for this at a Baptist university one time, because a lot of people will play this section. I don't do that. You got a picture in your head, didn't you? The other one just kind of hurries right on by you, and you're missing the slow part. So I believe in the fun. didn't play anything churchy. But I got to tell you, in 2008, I had a back fusion that went wrong. And I lost the entire use of the right side of my body from the hip down. And they said I would never walk again. I would never be able to move my foot again. I was in a wheelchair for a couple years and wore a brace after that on my leg when it started getting some feeling back in this area. And God has been good to me. I one day decided to take the brace and toss it and said, it will never move if I put a brace on it. And if anybody's foot ought to be able to talk to its brain, you know. And it doesn't do up so well. It does down, so that's why I have wood here. I do down pretty well. I don't do up so good anymore. But I find it just an absolute blessing that God has decided to let me have most of this back again, and now an employed shock as an organist. You know, and the other day it actually did. It actually moved, and I was like, score. This is really great. So I didn't play anything religious, but I do want to say he has blessed me over and over. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you for coming today, Linda. We greatly appreciate your time that you put in preparing for this and your being here with us. And we want to wish you blessings as you are in your ministry with St. Mark's Episcopal Church of Warwick. That's because St. Mark's Episcopal Church of Warren people are here, except it closed a few years ago. So they work beside us now. Thank you each and every one for coming. May God bless you through this week.